ask that after this session, there is going to be a moment of vote of thanks to all the organizers and everyone that has put this whole event together. So I could please ask, just as a courtesy, that we hang around for that final vote of thanks statement. I think it's only fair that we accord all the planners as well as the people who provided us with the venue some gratitude for all they've done. Before you now is the final panel, who will be discussing fostering UK and Africa collaborations. And as you have experienced in the last two days, we have had some really heavily packed sessions with a lot of information. I thought it was me. We've had two days of packed activity, and this will be no less. We have a very able panel before us today. It is going to be chaired by Sheila, and I will allow her to introduce herself, but also other members of the panel will introduce themselves before they begin the discussions. Thank you once again. Please, phones, if you could put them on silent, as little distraction as possible would be great. Thank you very much and enjoy the session.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for hanging around till the very end. My name is Sheila Ruiz. I'm the Deputy Director of the Royal African Society, which is a membership organisation that basically promotes and amplifies African voices and interests here in the UK. I'm delighted to be your moderator for this session, which is looking at collaborations between the UK and Africa in the context of the arts, media, and I guess social sort of justice movements more broadly. So we're going to be discussing the different approaches, opportunities, challenges of these international collaborations, and we'll also explore how these collaborations can really be an enabler to a mutual exchange of knowledge and mutual understanding, really, allowing for a sort of positive systemic change in society here in the UK, but also on the African continent, which I think is sort of like the underlying discussion that we've been having when we're talking about, decolonizing. So I missed the event yesterday, but I hear it went really well. I was here for the two previous panels today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what my panelists have to say. So just a note on fostering collaborations between the UK and Africa. This is something that's really at the core of the work of the Royal African Society. We're all about sort of trying to foster that mutuality and I guess, bring more prominence to African debates here in the UK. In partnership with the British Council last year, we published a report entitled Contemporary African Arts, Mapping Perceptions, Insights and UK-Africa Collaborations, which is basically exploring the untapped opportunity to program more African arts and culture here in the UK in response to the demand of an increasingly diverse population. That's a report that's freely available on the Royal African Society website, and some of you may want to access it. We'll be looking at some of the key questions that are tackled in the report here today. And I will move on to introducing my panelists for today. So on the far left, we have Olivia Wyndham-Stewart, who is a business and human rights specialist and also co-founder of the Museum of British Colonialism. Next to Olivia, we have Nadine Patel, who's the head of UK partnerships and programs for the Sub-Saharan African Arts Group at the British Council. Nadine has been a key contributor to the strategic development and management of the British Council's Sub-Saharan Africa Art Connects Us programme, which is a 3-year multi-million-pound project working in collaboration with partners and colleagues in literature, performance, music, film, architecture, design and fashion across the British Council's 19 offices on the continent. Nadine has worked to design programs to increase the knowledge, networks and opportunities for contemporary African arts professionals and their peers in the UK. Next to Nadine, we have Chow Tayana, who is our only panelist who's based on the continent in Nairobi. She's a digital heritage specialist and a digital humanities scholar. Chow is also the co-founder of the Museum of British Colonialism, and there she leads on digital heritage development, but she's also the founder of the African Digital Heritage, African Digital Heritage. Next to Chow, we have Dr. Pauline Long, who is an entrepreneur and philanthropist. You've got quite a bio to read. 4 Lifetime Achievement Awards, 3 Icon Awards, and over 45 community awards. Pauline Long is a Kenyan-born, UK-based entrepreneur, philanthropist, fashion designer, mentor, media mogul, motivational public speaker, music video director, producer, writer, and TV radio presenter and producer. She's also been crowned the most celebrated African female by Leadership Mind Ambassadors organisation and named African Caribbean Woman of the Year 2014. And then next to Pauline, we have, where are you? You're here. Julius Mbaluta. Some of you will have seen him throughout the 2 days. So Julius is currently the host for the global radio show known as Global Conversations on Colourful Radio, based here at the Africa Centre. He's an award-winning international journalist, a mentor to journalism students at City University, and he is the founder and chief editor of Informal East African newspaper, published here in the UK. His broadcasting career began at Carlton Television. He then joined ITV and later the BBC. So those are our panelists for today. And I think I'll just move on and start asking a few questions that I'd like to pose to all of the panelists. I'd like to keep it quite dynamic, conversational, as opposed to sort of long spiel. So I've told our panelists if they feel inspired to ask a question of each other and sort of interact, they should feel free to do so. So the first question I really want to ask all of you is, just basically for you to share your experiences of forging UK-Africa collaborations or African-UK collaborations. What have your motivations been behind this sort of work, and why was it important for you to forge such partnerships? And I will throw it to you, Olivia. Why not?
Thank you. I've made the mistake of looking at you while you're saying that, so now I have the microphone. Thank you very much for the introductions, and thank you everyone for being here now and through the whole 2 days. I think it's been, personally, I've found it really an amazing event, and thank you all for coming. My motivation for starting the collaboration in the Museum of British Colonialism is by nature a collaborative project. I am evidently a white British individual. Through the course of my post-secondary school career, I learned an entirely different history to the one that I had learned in school. And when I went on this journey to learn about that, I was only really learning from non-white British people who were in the UK. So I was learning a lot of things when I left the country. I work in supply chains, so I work on labour rights issues in supply chains. I was in Bangladesh, I was in Myanmar, I was all over the world. And I was just hearing things that just blew my mind, that I just never heard before. So when I thought about this idea, the first thing that came to my mind was, I need to work with somebody. I need to find people to work with. So before I did anything, apart from research whether the domain name was available, I started to ask people, do you know anyone who's interested in this history? Do you know anyone who wants to work on this? Do you know anyone with personal experiences of this? Why don't I know? Do they know? Can we try to understand it together? Because I was finding that the things that were known in my community were completely different to the things known in other communities. And when I was going to events, I was often the only white person there. So it was just so divided, and I just thought, how can we do something where we can start to create some sort of shared understanding that also comes into my community, so we can stop diverging on our paths and we can actually like move together. So that's the starting point for the work that we've done, which I hope is kind of continuing today and this weekend.
Thank you, Nadine.
So as Shayla mentioned, I work for the British Council and we're the cultural relations organisations for the UK. So we to build bridges between the people of the UK and the people overseas. And obviously everything we do has to be in partnership because we're not going to just be talking to ourselves. But I think in the context of today, the motivation is really about the issues and challenges that we have in the UK with regards to the knowledge of Africa, of the knowledge of African countries beyond some of the strong diaspora links. So obviously Nigeria, Ghana, as opposed to Namibia, Botswana. How do we spark interest and connections to other partners that we can seek to forge that, and also how do we really talk about the UK? So how do we build partnerships in Belfast and Sheffield as much as London and Edinburgh? So it's really about looking at who's out, who's got that insight, who has those connections, and how can we just help broker those connections and share that insight as part of our cultural relations work.
Thank you. Shan?
So I'll speak more to my experience working on the Museum of British Colonialism, and I think it's 2 years. 2 years?
2 years this week.
Oh, 2 years.
Happy birthday, Alice.
But I met Olivia through a friend of mine, a Kenyan friend of mine, who said, "Oh, there's a friend of mine in London who's looking for someone to work with on an idea she has," and we met outside Covent Garden Station. It was raining, I think. Very unlike the UK. But I think when I look at this subject and specifically subject on colonialism, there's, I don't know if it's a misconception or maybe an assumption that, you know, if you grow up in a colonized country, you know everything about colonialism. But that's not true. Growing up in Kenya, I do know a lot, but there was still a lot of things that I didn't know, and that I came across here in the UK, information about what happened in Kenya that I couldn't access in Kenya, but I accessed in the UK. So for instance, if you see the map downstairs, is a big map of the detention camps. We created that in Olivia's living room, because that was the first time I had come across a list of detention camps. I'd never heard of detention camps, you know, through my studies in Kenya. It wasn't formally in the syllabus. So I think for me, looking at UK-Africa collaborations is also about learning from each other and expanding the knowledge that we have, especially on shared issues, and I think we'll speak about it more.
Sure.
First of all, can I just say thank you, Julius, and your team for having us here. This is incredible. It's a full house, so can we just pay tribute to them? Please clap for them. It will be same for me to begin my speech without saying thank you to you. Well, my UK-Africa collaboration started over 18 years ago when I started the Mr. and Mrs. Africa UK, as a need to work with young East Africans in the UK to become entrepreneurs and philanthropists. And then I advanced into media. And this was, for me, anywhere in the world where we share knowledge, where we mentor Africans live. I'll give a good example. One young man from Kenya who I knew, I think it's about 4 years ago, because today he's graduated, and he sent me an email, this was last month, saying, because of you, because of watching you on television, and because of all these motivational Africans that you brought on your TV show, that today I'm proud to say that I was encouraged to finish my degree, and I'm now a teacher. So for me, that sort of collaboration, even though I was on television in the UK, in London, somebody in Kenya could actually see and hear us speak about our challenges and share our knowledge was very key. And then going to philanthropy, the Pauline Long Entrepreneurship Foundation, I was inspired to start it after supporting so many charities, which I am still supporting. I am ambassador for over 20 charities. But then I wanted to do something solid. I wanted to touch Africans in different countries, providing platforms for them, but then giving them the key to decide what paths they wanted to follow. And so the foundation is now in 6 countries, but even though I'm the president, they are the main drivers, so we collaborate. They will tell me, this will not work in this country, it will not work in Congo, because we're in Congo as well, it will not work in Malawi, so maybe we should do this. And then we work together, we sort of, strategize as a collaboration, as a partnership, which is absolutely amazing.
Great. Julius.
I'm glad you read the intro because I don't know how to talk about myself.
It's my job.
Yes, my journey is a bit interesting. When I look back, I thank God for where I've been and what I've done. Formerly Kenya screenwriter, screen actor, featured on a couple of different programs, some detective series, local soaps. That is in Kenya.
You're not doing
That was before. I'm mentioning my experience. That's what I'm talking about, my experience in Africa. So coming over with my creative mind in the UK, embarking on journalism, I found storytelling being my life. And the difference between screenwriting, acting, journalism is about facts and real life experiences that you see every day. And also the idea that you're journalists, most of the time I've worked with all diverse communities. And quickly, my most emotional story was one day I went to interview a cabinet minister, and it was a story about HIV/AIDS, hepatitis C. And while I was about to interview him, I had a comment from a lady. She was talking about, one day I was so happy to know I was HCV positive. That means she was suffering from hepatitis C. It's a killer disease more than HIV. Statistics-wise, last I checked, between UK and US, 4 million people within 2 years. So it's more serious, but why would she say so? And that is again where my storytelling comes from, and engagement with communities as well. And I started to focus more on that rather than the cabinet minister, because it's all the bureaucratic statement you get, official line of things. So, she accepted to give me an interview. And she said to me why she was so happy to know she was suffering from hepatitis C was because a week, as she was growing up, she looked up to the day of her wedding, the day she would be married. But after being married, the first week before the honeymoon, she started feeling unwell. She did both go to the hospital with her husband. And quickly, the doctor diagnoses her as mentally ill. Within a week, the husband divorces her on the grounds of being mentally ill. And it really touched me. But when I went to interview her, she was like, what about now? What about your life now? She got married to someone who was suffering from hepatitis C. And like, why again? Every time we talk, questions. And I'm like, she said to me, he understands me. We are the same. And I'm like, are you happy now? I asked the question that as a journalist I try to avoid to ask today. I said, what are your future plans? Then she says to me, you have no future plans. I'm like, why? You have a new husband. She says to me, both of us were given 6 months to leave. It is our last 2 weeks. And my cameraman pressed the wrong button on the filming, night vision mode. Me and her, when the film came out, we looked like wild animals in the jungle at night. Because those words hit him so powerfully. But the engineers for the graphics, they did all they could to make that part of the clip usable. The story became one of the most human stories aired across UK when I last did that story. Long story short, I kept praying silently she will leave and her husband will leave. But the channel caused me, they passed on. So, excuse me, if I don't ask you what are your future plans, please excuse me, you understand? But then, yeah, media broadcasting, I've been broadcasting across UK, ITV, BBC, and other channels, being political commentator for Sky News, occasionally. This colorful radio, it's my show. You're welcome, Global Conversations. You're welcome. Actually, it's based here. That's the logo. So what I've known about before I began to think about starting Informa East Africa, that's the most important part of my narrative, is because within these big channels, I could do a lot of research for months for one story. But I'll be given 2 minutes to tell the story. So I'm like, it was 6 months, do you understand? It's 3 months of research. Only 2 minutes? It's not fair. But I'm editing, that was the most frustrating part of my life. Because every bit that is useful and powerful, I have to keep on cutting. Cut. Until 2 minutes. So therefore, I thought as a community of Africans and all of us, because Informa is not about East Africans, it's all about Africans, it's all about all of us, UK here, everyone. I founded this newspaper to be a platform that tells news in a different way. We are taking the hang of that. Life has 2 spheres. There's happiness, there's sadness, there's joy, there's pain. But as much as we can talk about the hurricane, as much as we can talk about the scary stuff like US and Iran conflict, we should also talk about, there's a fella from my neighborhood who won an award to go and do something great. Or someone was knighted, or something better, so something positive. So as much as we focus on realities of news, we also try to push the other agenda, which is also, there's another positive part of life. It's not only pain. It's joy. It's not only bad news, there's good news. It's not only fake news, there's real news. So that's where we are coming from. We give you the whole package, Informa East Africa. So what I want to say is that with all my experience, because talked about colonialism, decolonization, we've been fantastic sessions since yesterday here. We're talking about that. How have they shaped me? Being in the media, covering these stories, covering the normal case in Royal Court of Justice for BBC, meeting with the veterans, them telling me how wrong we were. For example, the narrative of colonial power in Kenya was presented as a one community affair. There are history books written like that tilted to just one affair. When I met with the veterans, they were like, no. That's what actually the colonial power wanted Kenyans to believe. Because if it's just one community, it's easy to conquer. Divide and rule, that kind of a tactic. All these things have been alive, and they have shaped my storytelling in terms of justice, fairness, community, culture, cohesion of communities, not just one community. Interviewing different people from all over the place, it just shapes your thinking and puts you in a different way. You say, we live in a one world, and when we live in a one world, there's enough room. When we are saying Britain, we are swamped. When I went to the countryside last, they stood space. So I just want to end this there because it's an ongoing conversations. Was I the last one?
You were. I lost track there. Right. On that note, then, I would like to ask you all to reflect again on the question of whether there is an audience in mind, whether you have a public in mind when you're entering such collaborations. I know, Olivia, you touched on that, right? You know, you were saying you were going to these events and you happened to be the only white person in the room, and you were thinking, you know, where are the others? And, you know, for us at the Royal African Society, it's very important to kind of respond in a way, you know, respond to audiences' demands and kind of program as diverse a range of African voices, not just your usual kind of dominant voices that respond to the dominant kind of communities, but have a truly, well, we try and aim to have a truly Pan-African conversation. So with regards to that, could you answer the question around the sort of audience or public that you have in mind when you're thinking about forging these collaborations, and what it is that you would like to kind of see shift in them, if anything? You've got the mic there.
Same style. Maybe pass it on. I think, to come back to the point that I had before, is that I was finding that there were very divided audiences and very isolated audiences. So one of the main things that we've been striving to do is to create audiences that are as diverse and mixed and broad as possible. So, for example, because we have quite a diverse team and we have people working on this in Kenya and the UK, around the world, we have lots of different followers on Twitter, maybe half Kenyan, half British, or 40% of each, and then Myanmar, Bangladesh, people following from other former British colonies. Same with a lot of our website traffic. It basically, when you see the dark countries, it's like a map of the British Empire, because it's all the countries that were colonized by the UK are kind of interested in this work, so you can see where people are checking in from. And I think also that one of the main reasons Kenya is such an important thing is because a lot of people who experienced the atrocities that we're focusing on in terms of the Myanmar emergency are still alive. So there's a lot of emphasis on youth education, but for us there's also a desire to make this work seen by people who have not yet been recognised. So we are, I think, interested in bringing in communities to see this work and show back to them that we've been doing this work. So it's kind of generating that multi-generational aspect. And Jan, do you want to say more about the audiences of our work?
I'll speak more about the audiences in Kenya, where I'm more familiar with. But I think the other angle that we take with the audiences is about access, particularly in Kenya, and looking at how inaccessible this information has been. I cannot tell you how hard it is to know about detention camps in Kenya. Both for my generation, I think for my parents' generation, for our grandparents' generation, it's very different because they lived through these things. They don't talk about it. When we started doing the work with Olympia, I went back home and I asked my grandfather, do you know many camps around this area? And he said, yeah, by the bus stop. But he said, my mom was in a camp for 7 years. So you can imagine this is something I had never come across, yet it was so close. And it's a story with, it's the same thing with very many Kenyans who the story is very familiar, whether you're talking about Mau Mau or the case of the Kipsi case in the Sarai, that it is known within families, but we don't know it even as friends or as a community or as a country. So the thing about audiences, I think, for us and working in Kenya is to provide access to this information so that it can be accessible, whether it's on digital or physical. There are a lot of inequalities both in the digital world and in the physical spaces. But trying to say, how can we reach as many people as possible? So regardless of their age or their community or their background, it's more about, I think, providing access to as many people first and then understanding,
Can I add one point to that about our work? Because we made a documentary together, and it was half filmed in the UK and half in Kenya. And we've shown that in Kenya and the UK and Ireland and different places. And when you circulate something in different communities, you can kind of mix up the conversation. So you get feedback and different responses, and then you're kind of creating a shared onward journey. And I've never been at a screening of this documentary in Kenya, but Jan's been at some wild ones, and I've been at some crazy ones in Ireland that have been amazing because the engagement and knowledge of the audience is on a totally different scale to anything you have in the UK. So it's just fascinating to see those different audiences react to the same piece that you're presenting.
What's it called?
The documentary is called Operation Legacy. It's about the removal and destruction and hiding of archives at the end of the empire, and you can see it on history here, or email us.
So our programs are quite targeted. We're quite focused on a younger generation, so we really do focus on 18 to 35-year-olds. The reason being is in the countries that we work with in Africa, 70% of the continent is under the age of 30, so it's very youth-focused. It's primarily creators and their networks, and we are also quite connected to urban cities, so we don't have the facilities really to work outside of urban spaces. It does tend to be a fairly educated network of communities that we're engaged with, because what we're trying to do is really connect creatives and support their professional careers, as opposed to doing outreach programs and so on and so forth. So obviously there are different parts of the British Council, and we do things in education and English and so on that targets different communities, but in our arts programs it's very targeted to arts professionals and their audiences, and it would be the same in the UK. But we do suffer from our kind of colonial past, in the sense that you saw my title Sub-Saharan Africa. We are based in 19 countries and deliver there. So we do look at partnerships that allow us to get out of these constraints as much as possible, but we are very Anglophone as opposed to the Francophone, Lusophone countries. So there are, we are limited by the beast that we are. So we have to be very precise about who we're going to engage with. Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to touch on 3 areas, the philanthropy, the outside, and media. In terms of philanthropy, through the Pauline Long Entrepreneurship Foundation, in Africa, and especially Malawi and Kenya, our target audience are elderly women. In Kenya, we're looking after 65 women in one village called Mirogi. Does anyone know Mirogi? You're Kenyan. Do you know Mirogi? Mirogi, not Migori. Yeah. So over in that area, we have about 65 women. We provide basic needs, like flour, rice, sugar, salt, soap, every month to these women. In Malawi, we are targeting schools in the villages. Malawi is 70% rural, so we target young girls in villages who do not go to school because they're going through monthly period, they cannot afford sanitary towels, so we distribute sanitary towels to these schools. We have around 120 students that we pay school fees for, but the sanitary pads are across so many schools in Malawi, in the villages. We're currently providing disposable, but we're working on providing the reusable because it's more sustainable. We also look at housing in Malawi. For instance, the other day we just rehoused a child-led family. The oldest was a 12-year-old girl looking after 6 children, the youngest twins, 1-year-old twins. So the team on the ground visits, the shanties, the slums, in the Lilongwe area. I don't know if anybody knows Malawi. Any Malawian in here? No? No? We're all Kenyans. Yeah, so we penetrate the villages. We go grassroots, and our audience is purely those who really don't have, those who really cannot reach any help. Whereas in the UK, because we can't do this on our own, I can't do this on my own, a lot of this is funded by myself as an entrepreneur. In the UK, my audience is the African philanthropists, the African entrepreneurs who are willing to part with £1, even just £1, to buy a sanitary pad for a girl so that she goes to school. It's a shame for a headmaster to write to me directly saying, Dr. Pauline, this week we've had about 8 girls haven't turned up. Why haven't they turned up? Because we've run out of the sanitary pads. Come on, it's 2020, we can't do this. We can't carry on this way. In terms of the media, we finish off with the media. In terms of the media, our target audience really is just doing these collaborations with Africans anywhere in the world through Ben Television, going live. However, our target audience as well here in the UK is back again to philanthropists and to entrepreneurs, people that have businesses, to actually dig deep in their pockets and just put some money back, put some money in some media houses, because I know that we complain about the biasness of what's said about us in mainstream media. But what if we as Africans had full control, full ownership of our media houses and are funding it? The biggest challenge that media houses have is funding. You get a new media house today, after 2 weeks they're closed, they're shut because they cannot afford to pay staff. They have no income coming in. So again, it's up to us with so many entrepreneurs right now here in the UK to really think of ways that we can actually help our media houses grow.
Thank you, Pauline. I actually wanted to respond to your point about the sanitary towels and the fact that I should introduce you to someone, so you should reply to me. The founder of this charity in Malawi called the Cup Effect, and she's actually the head of the Women's Equality Party here in the UK. So I think you ought to have a conversation with her. And over to you, Julius. If you could keep it brief next time.
I think I'm being edited, but it's okay. No, I will keep it brief. I know we need to leave time for people to talk. In terms of media activities, which are quite various, I've got very different types of audiences. Internationally, because I do a lot of global political analysis to global TV channels from Arise News and Press TV, or even Sky News. I've got different audiences, and every time depends on the story that is on air, being aired.
Sorry, for the East African Informer particularly, you could answer the question in relation to that, because that would have been your target audience as the media outlet that you set out.
Well, that's what I'm coming to. Within the newspaper in Informer East Africa, we have done quite a lot of work. We started maybe just online, but in a very short time, we got demands from communities saying, why can't we have a proper newspaper? And therefore, we obliged. We've been printing for the last 5 years, and our audience, initially people thought just the title says Informer East Africa, you got to be East African to be covered by the newspaper. But that is not the case, because I always challenge people. Over here in the UK, we have the newspaper, The Sun. If we go by that, who does it belong to? So it's just a platform for everyone. It's just a platform for everyone, and our audiences, it took time for us to bring that message across. So as we are speaking right now, Informer East Africa is catering for Africa community diaspora here on the ground. We are also catering from UK, everybody, diverse communities. We've worked with a lot of communities in very great detail, even like Asian community. You find the newspapers within Asian community, like one time in the temple, leaders of the spiritual group of communities of some 5,000 people, 10,000 people. We've been invited by Asian community in Diwali in Wembley Stadium, an event that was about 60,000 people, and many other places. So we are very diverse. When the UK-Africa collaboration comes in, we've been media partners with UK-originated initiatives. Like one time by an organization UK-owned known as MASK, M-A-S-K. We were media partners with them, involving competition in Kenya for about 17 schools on artwork. And this artwork particularly, the child that won through the artwork was paid £3,000 here in the UK. And their piece of art was being exhibited in the UK Museum. And it was fantastic collaboration involving school children, UK people. So we never leave anyone alone. We carry everybody on board. In Informer East Africa, our audience is just everyone. Simply put.
to follow up on that, how do you keep sort of like up to date with what's going on the ground, being here on the in the diaspora? Like, do you have sort of like streamers, or what's your setup?
Yeah, sure. As we're speaking, we have our own writers on the ground in Africa, each country, in East Africa, but also occasionally we have writers from Africa as well. At the same time, we have diaspora-based writers. The essence of our platform is to connect. It's like the connecting point between the Africans on the ground and the Africans in the diaspora. And therefore, those who are in the diaspora get to learn about what's happening on the ground in their home countries, and then those who are in the diaspora get to know what's happening. Those who are in the countries get to know what's happening to their own people in these different countries around the world.
Thank you. I just wanted to put a question to Chow and Olivia. Yes, is that okay?